SEC updated power rankings. Let's get to it. Number 14 remains unchanged. Vanderbilt Commodores. You lose Mike Wright. You lose Ray Davis, two of your biggest playmakers. And not only do you lose them, but you lose them to fellow SEC programs. Tough blow for the Vanderbilt Commodores. But we're moving in the right direction. Love the progress of Clark Lea's program. But I think any list like this has to start with Vanderbilt, number 14. And, I don't know. Well, I did see some critiques. They beat number 13 on the list, so let's get right to it. Florida Gators. And again, this is not a list of last season. This is a list of Team A meets Team B on a neutral field. Who am I taking? I would certainly take Florida to beat Vanderbilt if they rematched again today. It's Jaden Rashad. I don't want to make it overblown because he never even stepped foot on campus. So it's not a major loss, but I still got big question marks of where Billy Napier will go with his starting quarterback. You have to assume at this point it's going to be Graham Mertz. I don't know if that's a good thing or not based on conversations I've had. But, losing some important pieces here. Justice Shorter's gone. Osiris Torrance gone. Two of the linemen just have transferred now to Southern Cal. So they fixed the offensive line in an off season, which was fantastic. But now you've lost many of the key pieces. So it'll be interesting to see how Florida revamps that. The defense was just awful last season, and I love what they did in recruiting. But how many of those guys will be able to compete for starting positions year one? I don't know. It remains to be seen. I'm really down on Florida right now, and I don't know. I was high on them last offseason. Now I'm down on them. That's basically how it goes on this show. Number 12, catching a lot of heat for this. Auburn Tigers. Yes, they're killing it in the transfer portal, so I got to give them their due here. Maybe they do make a big 180, but we're still missing a quarterback. Robbie Ashford, if he's your guy, I think you're going to be stuck at the bottom of the SEC West. And clearly they tried to get Grayson McCall. There was some recruitment of Spencer Sanders. Apparently, you're not allowed to say that and say they wanted him. Apparently, they didn't want him. I don't know why. Heard many people say Spencer Sanders would be the ideal fit for Hugh Freeze, but that's neither here nor there. Their line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, a train wreck when Hugh Freeze got there. They have addressed a lot of that via the transfer portal, but you can't just insert bodies and get that chemistry, particularly on the offensive line. They're going to have their work cut out for them this spring and in training camp, getting that unit ready to go. Good days are coming for Auburn football. I'm kind of pumping the brakes on just how much we'll see right away. And, Hugh Freeze is going to win down there. But until further notice, I got to keep him right around this 12 range. Catching heat. I just catch heat for all of these. But number 11, Arkansas. I've docked you a couple points. Kendall Brow's gone. Barry Odom gone. I know we're all convinced Dan Enos is a major upgrade. Travis Williams, major upgrade. I'm not ready to go quite that far. Lost a lot of pieces via the transfer portal. Brought some in as well, though. So, that might be a net equal there, perhaps. You got a completely reworked receiving room for the second year in a row that you managed it well last offseason. If you do it again with some of these pieces you're bringing in, you just got an outstanding coaching staff is what it is. The offensive line down some pieces. I get it. You got arguably the best quarterback in the SEC. You got arguably the best running back in the SEC. But that defense, man, they're missing some pieces. And I said it on a recent show, players that have declared for the NFL draft. I think Drew Sanders is going to be the toughest player of any SEC player to replace that declared early for the NFL draft. Doesn't mean they can't replace him, but that's a huge hole for Arkansas's defense. So, yeah, I think it's only fair for now. Arkansas, number 11, the schedule, it's not quite the gauntlet that it normally is. So I think I'd rather be underrated than overrated. Let them work. Let's see what they are on the field. And hell, I'll probably change this list in another week or two and bump them back up. Number 10, Missouri. So I moved you way up. Love the addition of Kirby Moore, offensive coordinator. not sitting here saying that Jake Garcia coming in here is going to be your savior, but the fact that you got him, the fact that you got Sam Horn, competition. You don't want another season of and Brady Cook was injured. That was revealed later, so it's not. I don't even know how fair it is to criticize him. But if you got those three guys competing and they're all healthy, you have to believe that the quarterback position will be a position of strength for Missouri next season. Many defenders returned, that several of them I thought would jump to the NFL. So that's another reason that I've kicked Missouri up here to a top 10 team in the SEC. Had them 13 in my last power rankings. Mizzou going to continue to fly under the radar, but possibly the most improved team in the SEC if they can get solid quarterback play this fall. Mississippi State, number 9. This is another team I dropped back a little bit. It's nothing they did wrong. It's more, I think, some of these other teams, I've been impressed with some of the moves they've made. Zach Arnett, debut as a head coach. It's going to be pretty interesting to see. You never know with these guys. I mean, he could be the next Nick Saban. He could be the next Chad Morris. I mean, say what you want. Chad Morris, his reputation was incredible when he was at Clemson as an offensive coordinator. He nearly landed the Texas A&M job. And when he didn't get that, he pivoted and got the Arkansas job. So you just never can tell how these guys are going to do when it's their program they're running. He's far and away the youngest head coach in the SEC. He may even be the youngest coach in the FBS. But I do love the fact that his staff, I love the additions he made. They finalized that staff. And a lot of these coaches that he's working with, he doesn't have experience with. But they're highly rated guys. And what that tells me is two things, really. Zach Arnett has got people in coaching circles that he trusts. He listens to them. He's worked for Rocky Long, obviously worked for Mike Leach. So he's got some stellar connections. It's one thing to hire someone you've never worked with before, but you really got to have faith in the people recommending these coaches to you, so to speak. Because a lot of these coaches, I know it's going to be shocking, but they just hire their buddies. They hire guys they grew up with, the guys that they GA'd with that are totally unqualified. That's how we get Marcus Satterfield as South Carolina offensive coordinator, even though he may have done a little bit better job than many of us realize. But that's how coaching mistakes are made. Oftentimes. You just hired people you came up with. Zach Arnett did not do that. He hired people that are highly rated, that he doesn't have relationships with outside of, a couple of guys he did. Clearly, the defensive coordinator was someone that worked with him his entire time there at Mississippi State, and he promoted him. But I think that's a strong start for Mississippi State. The way they finished in recruiting, the way they handled the transfer portal, I think it's quite clear Zach Arnett, at least early, has got a firm grasp of his duties down there, and he's doing a good job. Now, number 8, Ole Miss. This is a team that I did move up several spots here. Pete Golding, love that hire for Ole Miss. I think he will be, same thing we've been saying. Alabama may be happy to get rid of him. Ole Miss should be thrilled that they got him. He is far and away a better option than what they had previously as a defensive coordinator. He's better as a recruiter. That's the knock, obviously, on Lane Kiffin. He doesn't like to recruit. Well, this Pete Golding, he loves it. I mean, this is what he does. Walker Howard was instrumental that getting his commitment there in Ole Miss. Pete Golding recruits the state of Louisiana. Walker Howard's from Louisiana. You see the ties there. But Pete Golding, I think, is going to knock it out of the park and makes Ole Miss very interesting. Same thing we were saying about Missouri with all these quarterbacks. You bring in Spencer Sanders. You bring in a Walker Howard. Jackson Dart may be pissed, but if you just cater to players that are not quite getting it done, and not saying Jackson Dart wasn't getting it done, but hey, this is big-time football. This is basically, they run it as mini NFL down there at Ole Miss. They bring in free agents every year to try to take your job. How are you going to respond to that? Do you go into a shell, or does that make you better? Does that make you work harder being pushed? No, you can lose your job this offseason. We'll find out what Jackson Dart's really all about. And this, adding those players may be the best thing that ever happened to Jackson Dart, because I don't think there's any way to look at this and say they're bringing in Spencer Sanders to do anything other than start. So what is Jackson Dart going to do? He's got to work his ass off. He's got to be a better player. And if he beats Spencer Sanders out, you'll know he had really earned it. And hell, Spencer Sanders may be gone before anybody. I mean, who knows how that's going to play out. But I really like the moves. They're not content down there after a dreadful, dreadful finish. I'm not writing off Ole Miss. Not at this point. All right, number 7. Big jump here. Texas A&M back on a bandwagon. Thank you for bringing in Bobby Petrino, Jimbo. I mean, I think this could be a hell of a pickup. And yeah, the depth is going to be an issue, just like it potentially, just like it kind of was last season with so many transfers heading out of the program. But sometimes when you lose guys that aren't bought in, guys that are causing trouble, addition by subtraction, maybe that's a thing down there in College Station. We got to get this defense going, though. That's certainly an issue. I saw a stat that I believe of the 22 starters in the LSU game, I think they're bringing back 19 of them. And the other 3 that they aren't left early for the NFL. Now, they may have been their 3 best players, so you got to replace those. But A&M's got all the talent in the world. They're not going to have any expectations. It's probably exactly where they need to be until they've earned that reputation. Come into a season, not being top 10, not being top 15. Hell, they're probably not even going to be ranked. And I don't think they should be. Who cares? You come in here, you got something to prove. Jimbo's got his back against the wall, so to speak. Connor Wigman showed enough, I think, at the end of the season to give you a ton of faith that he could be the best quarterback that Jimbo has had at Texas A&M. I mean, Kellen Mond will certainly have something to say about that, but Connor Wigman, as a freshman, I think he looked just as good from what I can remember of Kellen Mond as a freshman. So he'll have a long way to go, but there's pieces to build around. And I really think if there is a dark horse in the SEC that could come out of nowhere, be what LSU was last season, next season, I think it's Texas A&M. All right, number 6, Kentucky. Ooh, maybe speaking about dark horse, maybe Kentucky, we could throw them into that conversation as well. But just love the fact that of all their issues, quarterback, running back, offensive line, addressed it via the transfer portal. Because the offense was so dreadful last season, I think people don't understand how good the defense is. If they can just get a competent offense going, Liam Cohen back to engineer the offense, going from one of the best in the recent SEC history and losing one of the worst in SEC history. I mean, what's not to like? Again, this is another program that needs the disrespect, does not need to be praised. Kentucky is probably not going to be ranked. They don't deserve to be ranked. But if they can get Devin Leary going, if they can get Ray Davis to slide in seamlessly to replace Chris Rodriguez, Kentucky has got a very nice core. And they've got maybe the best trio of receivers in the SEC, possibly. That may be going a little too far because 2 of them were true freshmen last season, but they showed promise. They showed that Devin Leary could slide right in here and be more productive than he ever was at NC State. And if he does just that, Kentucky's going to have a hell of a year, a nice bounce back year here under Mark Stoops. Number 5, the South Carolina Gamecocks. Big question here after Spencer Sanders and Juice Wells' return. What will this Dow Loggins offense look like? I mean, that's going to be one of the biggest questions entering next season in the SEC. I love what the Gamecocks are doing out on special teams. I mean, hell, they got the best special teams coach in college football, Beamer ball. It's funny we call it Beamer ball when it's Pete Limbo ball, but it is what it is. South Carolina finished strong, and if they just keep that momentum going, they're going to be one hell of a dangerous team next season. But I will admit, I think there is a rather large drop-off between 5 and 4. You could kind of, between 5 and 10, 11, maybe even 12, you could kind of talk me into any of these teams. I just lean heavily on Spencer Rattler back for another season. I think that is potentially huge because he's got all the talent in the world. We've seen it. We've seen it against Tennessee. We've seen it against Clemson. If they can get that guy to show up 12 times next fall, they ain't losing many games. I'm just telling you right now. And maybe playing for Dow Loggins will unlock all that talent. Now, arguably the most controversial of this entire list, Alabama, number 4. I mean, what are we basing them on? We don't know who the coordinators will be. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be. The offensive line has been an issue. Receivers, yeah, they started to emerge a little bit, but not anywhere near the caliber they have been. They're just a hard team to evaluate. And I get it. They got all the talent in the world. They just signed the greatest recruiting class ever. Well, hell, Texas A&M did that last year. It didn't help. Alabama had the number 1 class in 2021. About a third of those guys are gone already. So, yeah, you're going to have to convince me of something else other than the freshmen are going to come in here and save the day at Alabama. We got a loaded roster. We got the greatest college coach of all time. But the cracks are in the armor, so to speak. And I don't know. If you put Alabama on a neutral field with no Bryce Young, no Will Anderson, the current roster they have, give me the top 3 teams I got on this list to beat them, starting with number 3, Tennessee, Joe Milton. We're back on the Joe Milton train. Never said a bad word about Joe Milton. I was hacked otherwise if you find anything to the contrary. But I just think it's fascinating, Josh Heupel, the job he's done. And then you look at the bowl game against Clemson. We're down our starting quarterback. We're down our Biletnikoff receiver. We're down our second receiver. We're down our best linebacker. We're down our best safety. They just plug and play guys. And they're getting to the point in that roster where they're deep enough across the board. I think this is, their recruiting class is like number 10, but it is loaded with potential impact players at critical positions, linebackers, secondary, quarterback, running back, receiver. Tennessee's here to stay. I really do think. As long as Josh Heupel's here, the offense is going to be high-flying. Tim Banks, I know he catches hell for that South Carolina game, which he should, but one game does not define how good of a coach he is. The defense won him the Pitt game, the LSU game, the Clemson game. Defense here at Tennessee, they've been at or number 1 in tackles for loss both years there under Tim Banks. They make big-time plays, pick sixes, interceptions. I like what Tim Banks is doing on the defensive side of the ball, and considering also you have to factor in how many snaps they have to play because Tennessee's offense goes so damn fast. It's not an easy job to be a defensive coordinator for Josh Heupel, and Tim Banks is handling it pretty well. Number 2, LSU Tigers. Again, 9 offensive starters returning next season. We do lose Kayshon Boutte, who at one, he said he was coming back. Now he's gone. I can be honest with you. I think that might be a positive. Again, another addition by subtraction. He was such a storyline year 1 under Brian Kelly, and hell, he couldn't even go a month without being a sideshow once again. So I think we washed our hands of that, bringing in a talented receiver from Alabama that could potentially do a lot of the things that Kayshon Boutte does. I think their defensive coordinator, Matt House, very underrated. Mason Smith back on the defensive line. They've added about 6-7 defensive linemen or front 7 players via the transfer portal. They fixed their secondary via the transfer portal last offseason. Now they're fixing their front 7, doing that same thing. Harold Perkins, maybe the best defensive player in the country. Brian Kelly, they're a sleeping juggernaut. They really are. And every coach they've had in the last couple have won a national championship. The potential is always there. It's the volatility is what kills them. They cannot maintain it. Brian Kelly, I know he had a couple down years at Notre Dame, but I think he's like the all-time winningest coach there, at least the last 50 years or something. So he's won everywhere he's been. He's shown that he can consistently get his teams to perform. All the potential in the world down there in Baton Rouge, as long as Brian Kelly doesn't screw it up, and I don't think anything in his history says he will, then LSU is here to stay, And right now, they're the team to beat in the SEC West. I really do think. So, of course, that just leaves them Georgia Bulldogs, number one. I mean, you cannot do a list like this and not have Georgia number one. They're just that dominant. And I realized, remember we did the NFL draft deadline, winners, losers, put Georgia on the losers, but that ain't going to slow them down, trust me. Georgia, more loaded than anybody, put up their roster against, it matches up with everybody. Stetson off to the NFL. That's a blow. He was super clutch, no doubt, but I don't think Georgia is going to be slowing down anytime soon. And, I try not to factor in the schedule here at all, but I mean, they may get tested once next season. So they're going to be staying at number one, I have to imagine, for some time until their trip at Tennessee. And hell, they'll probably hear for the first 2 months of the season how they're just going through these damn cupcakes, and that'll probably piss them off enough to destroy Tennessee on the road. So give me Georgia number one in the SEC. Georgia number one in the country. The biggest issue that I had with Georgia was lack of explosive plays. And hell, they went out here and got Ra Thomas and Dominique Lovett. Dominique Lovett's a big play waiting to happen. So, yeah, they shored up the only weakness, if you can even call it that, on their roster. It's Georgia's world, and we're just living in it at this point in time.